Hey, welcome to the channel. We hope that you enjoy today's stories and check out the chapters on the video to see all the stories for today. But before we get into this video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notified when we release a new video. So let's get into the video.
What? A child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Story do you have?
Experience 1. I met this kid while in junior high. Knew him during his first year in high school. Back in 78 or 79. Remember the movie Carrie? He had that for a mother. He was super religious and had to pray multiple times a day. Carried a large Bible with his school books. Wore old-fashioned formal clothes, 1950s-style haircuts, and horned-rimmed glasses. His mother punished him because she saw us talking when he got off the school bus. I guess I didn't pass the friend standard. He was so unsocialized and awkward. He was grateful to speak with anyone. And I didn't make fun of him. I guess it got to be too much. He didn't come back to school for his sophomore year. I later learned that while his mother was sleeping, he doused her with gasoline and set her and the bed on fire. She lived. And they just disappeared. I never heard from him again. Experience 2. There was that nuclear revenge post about a guy ostracized by the entire town, I think because he was born out of wedlock, and after getting out of there became an inspector of some kind. Eventually, he was given a list of factories that needed reviewing and one that needed to close. The factory in his hometown was on the list. He goes there, inspects, and they act all buddy-buddy thinking they're safe from closure. Boy, were they wrong. Every infraction, breach of safety, or incorrect anything went into his report. The whole town basically was built around that factory, and when it shut down, the town was desolate and dead within a few years. Experience 3. A guy I went to high school with burned the bridge with his entire family. We weren't best friends, more of a friend type of situation, so my info is a lot of hearsay. But I do know some things for certain. He was the middle child, with an older sister and a younger brother. His parents had owned a diner and it had been in his family for a few generations. It was an unspoken rule that the kids of each generation would help out when they were little, and eventually take it over to keep it in the family. The problem was none of them wanted anything to do with it. It was the easiest way to set him off, even mentioning it would have him go from 0-100 real quick. This didn't stop either of his parents though. They would joke about how the kids didn't need to worry about college or moving away, and all of that would be taken care of when they would run the diner. The sister is the oldest, was the first really be pressured into it, but he and his brother told her to get out and not look back, and don't let them guilt trip her. So, she did, and goes to college on a sports scholarship and then moves a few states away. She occasionally visits, but more or less left the town in her rearview mirror. Then it was his turn, but unfortunately, he didn't have the money to get away, so his parents tell him to go to community college and work at the diner to save money. This is where the issue started. The younger brother doesn't go to college and decides to go couch surfing and backpacking across the country for a few years. Occasionally coming back to work for a few weeks when he needed the money, only to take off again. So, my friend gets left running the place, despite swearing he never would. I'd see him around sometimes at bars, and he was a bitter shell of his former self with a bad drinking problem and a series of failed relationships. His parents didn't seem to care that their son was a depressed alcoholic, so long as their family legacy stayed the same. He confided in me how they were pushing him to get married and give them grandkids, to settle down and let go of this silly dream of starting over when he has the diner. Which, given how sloshed he was in nearly every interaction I had with him, it's impressive he was able to run it. His sister and brother couldn't be bothered to come down and help, and in fact, they started to agree with the parents that he should just cut his losses and make this life work for him. One day, he drops off the face of the earth. Nobody sees or hears from him for 3 weeks. His parents say he went on a vacation, and they also hadn't heard from him. Then suddenly he's back in town, seemingly in much better spirits, looking healthier than we had seen him in years. About 2 months later, the diner is torn down and replaced with some other business. As it turns out, his girlfriend at the time gave him an ultimatum: quit the drinking and go to therapy or we're done. So, he does, and the therapist points out the obvious things linking to his depression and says he should take a vacation and figure out what else he wants to do with his life. He went to Vegas, partied for 2 weeks, and admittedly thought about ending himself. After getting it out of his system, he devises a plan to sell the diner and pocket the money for himself. Everything was in his name as the owner anyway, so it was pretty easy. He took the best offer he could and used that money to leave town. The brother and sister didn't get a dime, and the parents were already retired. He moved to the other side of the country with his now wife, and we follow each other on social media, but he seems much happier. Apparently, he hasn't spoken a word to his family in years, nor they to him, and does not intend to start.
Do you like listening to these stories? Do you want to hear more of them? Then click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And check the description for links to more videos and interesting stories.
Experience 4. My bio parents lost custody of me due to addictions and neglect. I was adopted as a teenager by a woman who ended up being emotionally abusive, and I was supposed to be thankful because she pulled me out of the gutter and gave me opportunities in her mind. She's an extravagant spender and has blown through 2 large inheritances and a divorce settlement, years of alimony, and refused to get a job, even though she holds multiple master's degrees in a desirable field, used the school loans to continue funding her lifestyle instead of working. She never saved for retirement despite having the means and opportunity to do so. Growing up, she told me I would grow up to be a substance-addicted dropout. I suspect that her bio children were her retirement plan because she told them to marry rich and push them into what she thought would be lucrative degrees. It was a classic scapegoat or golden children scenario. She never fathomed that of all her kids, it would be me that broke 6 figures having landed a great career. Too bad for her that I cut her off 7 years ago and never looked back. She's now in her 60s having to start over financially. Her children don't make enough to support her, and I won't contribute. Experience 5. Growing up, our neighbors had a couple of boys, 10 and 14 give or take at the time of this story. The younger son had a good friend that would stay at their house very frequently. He was always pretty quiet and kept to himself, except when he was with his friend, the 10 years old, which was when he could be himself. One day we find out that he was permanently moving in with my neighbors due to an unsafe situation at home. Apparently, this poor kid got to watch his mother be ended by her boyfriend, all because of illegal substances. Right in front of him. The 10-year-old. Luckily, my neighbors stepped up and offered to take him in, which was actually great for everyone. He really started to blossom and became pretty stable, with a caveat: he just didn't take any ish from anyone. Which leads us to our terrific act of rebellion. Like everyone else in our neighborhood, we rode the bus home. This kid is riding home from elementary school when the bus driver started going off on the kids for real or imagined indiscretions. Well, this kid takes offense to this and speaks up on behalf of the rest of the kids. The bus driver, now royally angry for our Nanas crowd, tells this kid, "One more word and I'm kicking you off the bus." Well, you are correct in your assumption of what transpired next. The kid gets kicked off the bus, which royally makes him angry, so cue MC. The kid walks off the bus and immediately walks in front of the bus. We were about a mile from his normal stop at our street, and this was a 2-lane road with sporadic oncoming traffic. No way the driver could get away with trying to pass, so he drove at a walking pace until the kid got to our street. Parents were wondering where their children were, as everyone was now 30+ minutes late, and were overall very amused when they discovered the cause. Still, about the proudest of a 10-year-old I've ever been, and I have 2 of my own. Anyway, I got to look that guy up. Hope he's well. Experience 6. Someone I used to have in a support group I once helped run for intercourse victimized and abused young men shared with us what happened to him. I'm not going into the finer details of it, but the broad stroke is he was being victimized by a teaching assistant. He went to other teachers, school admins, and even the police. No one believed him, and he even got punished for making it up to get a staff member in trouble. It destroyed his personality. He became bitter, resentful, spiteful, and generally hateful of other people. He was improving his demeanor in the group, but from what he tells us, he just wanted to watch the world die at the time. A couple of years later, that same TA tripped down the stairwell in one of the side hallways of the school, and he happened to be nearby. He saw she was badly injured and likely had broken bones and was bleeding from her head. Instead of helping her, he literally stepped over her and pretended she wasn't there. Security footage showed he wasn't the one to push her, but when asked why he didn't say anything or get help, he simply said that the last time he tried to tell people about something involving her, no one helped, so why would they do this time? Experience 7. Quite a literal version. Had a kid come to my 9th grade classroom with 4 felony arson counts. We knew before he got there that he had 4 felonies, just not in what and his other 3 teachers and the principal called an emergency meeting where they didn't want him in their rooms at all. The principal wanted us to either give up our planning or teach him after regular hours. I adamantly told them to get screwed and that I wouldn't give my planning up for God himself, and the least restrictive environment said he was in the classroom. To be honest, I already had a room full of gang members, so what was another kid with felonies? Turns out this kid has never met his dad, and his mom worked 3 to 4 jobs. Only got to see her maybe once a week. He was breaking into homes for food and then burning them down for attention. It was really just a cry for help. I liked the kid, and he had me during the first period. Would come in high as a freaking kite and gave him cherry Coke and bagels to eat. Never skipped my class. Never misbehaved after the first week with me. Everyone hated on him, and he lashed out accordingly. Started reading an explicit intercourse magazine and drinking a 5th of vodka in math class, etc. Ended up getting expelled despite my intervention. A few months later, he was arrested and charged as an adult after a string of breaking and entering with arson and robbery. He got some girlfriend who convinced him to rob places to steal her ish, which of course he did because no one else was acting like they loved him, and OFC he went back to setting fires. Torched at least half a dozen homes. Experience 8. One of my friends in high school was a major overachiever. Stayed at school or work as much as possible, to the point where he may have spent an hour or less at home a day. He would always deflect questions about his home life, but confided in me that it was bad. Calling him the black sheep of the family would be a major understatement. His family had some money, not millionaire or billionaire, but better off than most, and they told him from elementary school he would always be useless and never amount to anything. He is making bank after getting through college and finding a bomb job with a big pharmaceutical company. Meanwhile, his father's company, which has been in the family for a few generations, got picked apart by the government. Someone tipped them off that he was lying on taxes, hiring immigrants for next to nothing, hiding OSHA violations, and much more. As the dust was settling and the damage was really being seen, my buddy drove to his former family home and dropped off a file. The same file he gave an attorney that gave it to the government and only said, "Who won't amount to anything." Experience 9. My mother was abusive to my sister and me growing up. Sis ended up anorexic, has been in therapy her whole life, took years and years to fix herself and still isn't there. I ended up with bad generalized anxiety, social anxiety, depression, and self-loathing, and was emotionally and verbally abusive in past relationships. My mom used to make us promise we'd never put her in a home when she got old. Last year, my mental problems came to a head, and I started therapy, medication, and being honest with my parents about my mom's abuse. I gave them an ultimatum of either acknowledging the damage and taking responsibility by apologizing for it so we could move forward, or I'd never speak with them again. My dad apologized immediately. He was less abusive than she was and held more guilt than she ever did. We're on good terms now. My mother denies everything and has been totally cut off by my sister and me. She will end up in old folks' homes after all. She has no children left. Consequences of her own actions. So, I don't know, I didn't burn down a village, but I did burn down that relationship. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Experience 10. Not a village, but a woman's marriage. When I was in elementary, I was forced to be in the normal music class instead of the special ed class. I'm going to the proper terms, mainstreamed, and assisted because I liked them more, for years. Even after my mom and both of my therapists requested, I get put in the assisted class for sensory reasons. I'm autistic and had sensory overloads daily in this class. The teacher said I was lying to them and always did quiet activities when someone sat in on the class. So, I suffered every Monday and Wednesday. I had school from when I was 4 to when I was 10. But then I went to middle school and life moved on. I still loved music, so I tried to join the choir. I was denied for 2 years, but got in when I was 12. I'm a pretty good singer and had no other extracurricular activities, so I began helping the choir director. Eventually, he asks me if his daughter, who's also autistic, could be good with music like I was. He says her music teacher in elementary school says she's terrible with music and throws tantrums in class. I say she's most likely not having tantrums, but instead having a sensory overload because 38-year-olds playing the recorder at once is hell. Other than a few other questions about his daughter, it's the last I hear of this elementary school music class. A couple of years later, I'm bringing my mom lunch at my old high school. She works there as an assisted class teacher, and I see my old choir director and his daughter. We catch up and eventually, they leave to get lunch together and I chat with my mom. She says,
"You know, you're one of the reasons he divorced his wife."
I'm like, what? And she explains that his ex-wife was the elementary school music teacher, and when I said elementary school music class is sensory hell, he found out she doesn't believe autism exists and thinks you can fix neurodivergent kids by making them so uncomfortable they become normal. Not a good attitude for the mom of an autistic kid. She also refused to take a course on how to teach mainstream special needs kids, so she also lost her job. No regrets.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.